Joining us now from TSN, Hockey Insider, part of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, of course, part of the Go-Goat Sports family of podcasts, our Wednesday regular, Mr. Darren Dreger. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, fellas. Ray and I recorded an interview with Jacob Middleton from the Minnesota Wild earlier this afternoon, and I believe the Ray and Dregs podcast will drop tomorrow. We've got a sampling of Middleton's personality. What a super character he is. Just talking about everything, his life, his limited wardrobe, why it took him so long to kind of crack the NHL, etc. Just a breath of fresh air in terms of dealing with pro athletes and his availability, his willingness to take us into his world. So it'll be a good one.
And if the Ottawa Senators didn't just eliminate the Vancouver Canucks, Middleton's Minnesota Wild have the chance to tomorrow night, of course.
Yeah, they're playing good hockey, right? And I don't think that should be a surprise. Anybody who's watched, Minnesota over a stretch of time here, this team is built to challenge for the Stanley Cup. Billy Guerin put everything on the line in convincing Craig Leopold, his owner, to bite down hard in buyouts of Suter and Parise. And ultimately, that is going to catch up to the Minnesota Wild in the near future. So, they're in it to win it this year. Leading up to the trade deadline, Billy Guerin didn't seem to have a real strong appetite for meddling with the chemistry of that group. He didn't feel like they were going to have to add. Then they kind of went through a tough patch, and maybe that opened his eyes to, we may not be as complete as we think they are. We are. And so you bring in Marc-Andre Fleury, bit of a no-brainer there. It gives you stability with Talbot in goal. But the pieces he added in Middleton and Delorier, man, these are old school Western tough dudes, right? So they're a pretty complete package. Now, we're going to find out how that translates in the playoffs. And the playoffs, especially the first round, are always a great breeding ground for upset. But I like the makeup of the Minnesota Wild. They're well coached, well managed, and they seem to have, according to Jake Middleton, a really good cohesive group there.
Well, plenty of ties that bind there. As you mentioned, the Canucks' next opponent there in Minnesota. Characters in Minnesota. Well, there used to be a coach on that bench who was quite a character. We have him here. But before we get into Boudreau, and I know I'm treading on Gord Miller territory more so than Darren Dreger branded territory, but did Ray's mix match suit come up on the Ray and Dregs hockey podcast? Okay.
No.
At least twice. And, you guys know Ray well. Like, he's a put-together guy, right? I mean, on the golf course, Ray has got the fancy golf shirts and then the shorts, pants, whatever. Goes out for dinner, well put together. Always looks good for the camera. So I think he was a bit rattled and then went, I guess it still kind of matches. Yeah, the pants don't necessarily go with this suit jacket, but that's fine. That'll give me something to mix and match, not only for tomorrow's game. So he's got the Leafs and the Lightning tomorrow in Tampa Bay. But then he's got, I believe, an ABC game, not ABC, then ESPN on the weekend. So he's not going home for the next few days. So whatever combo he's swinging tomorrow and the weekend, it could be a creative attire.
I'm sure as Craig Button is thinking, at least he's clothed.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just going to say, at least he's clothed and not in a public space, nude.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Which, of course, remains the holy grail of Ray Ferraro.
Oh, there's a lot of them. I don't know. There's a lot of them.
I'm not sure we're beating that one.
No.
As everything seems really quiet on Boudreau, we were speculating before that overtime loss to Ottawa that after another 6-game win streak here, could they really move on him? Is he not safe at this point? But what are you hearing, and do you think these last 5 games at the end of the day are going to matter to whether or not he's back, Dregs?
Well, every game matters, but matters in the sense of, okay, well, what's that review look like? Who's involved in the review? So I think the exercise here is more in the inexperience of hockey operations, not Jimmy Rutherford. Jimmy Rutherford has hired so many coaches, fired a number of coaches. He's been there, he's done it all, he's seen it all. But I believe that he wants Patrick Galvin and his assistant general managers to experience what you have to go through when you're going through that full off-season review. And in this case, they have the luxury of having potentially an expiring contract in Bruce Boudreau to wrestle with as well. So why not use that as a learning experience? I mean, I'd count myself as being shocked if Boudreau isn't brought back. The sense is that he's likely going to come back. But as we talked about last week, nothing has changed. I mean, the focus has been on the Vancouver Canucks staying in this meaningful stretch of hockey and staying in the playoff conversation. It's unlikely, but they're still in the conversation. So as far as Bruce and the players can push that, then I think everybody within the organization is going to be happy. The only way that this comes off the rails, I think, in terms of an extension, is if the term that Boudreau is expecting, the money that Boudreau is expecting, doesn't match what the Vancouver Canucks are willing to commit to. And you're not going to know that until you get into what is necessary and needed, and that's a negotiation. But at this spot, and as we have this conversation, I still believe he's coming back. They just have to have the conversations that they have to have in the offseason after this stretch of games and the regular season is over.
How much do they pick the brains of the players on this, or do they try to keep the emotions of that player-coach relationship out of it?
No, I mean, I think they would have some conversation, exit interview, but are they getting specific? What do you like? What don't you like? Probably not. I doubt that. But you can glean feedback without even poking around and getting specific, right? When you're having your exit interviews with the players, which Patrick Allvin would be, key part of, obviously, maybe he's looking at the culture of the group. What you like in that sense? What didn't you like? What are some areas that you think as an organization, especially from a roster perspective, we need to work on? And sometimes that can be a reflection of the coaching, the direction of the coaching staff. But I'd be pretty surprised if there were any direct questions to any of that veteran group specific to Bruce Boudreau as a coach.
Just want to pin down here, Dreg. So you, let me just get this straight. Do you think Boudreau has told the Canucks, look, I'm unwilling to play out my option, it's got to be an extension, or do you think there's a world where he would come back and coach out that option?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the information, Matt, to say he wouldn't. So I think that he's open to possibility. I guess, what he would probably expect, though, is that what more is there left to prove, right? To earn the conversation, negotiation of getting into that discussion on what an extension looks like. But, they've got to go through that process. All I know is how openly Bruce has talked to pretty much everybody in media circles of how eager he was to get back to coaching, not just coaching at the NHL level, but coaching, period. He was getting to a point of where he wanted to get back so bad, he was borderline desperate, not financially, just that's how much Boudreau loves to coach. And the fact that he seems to be a real good fit in Vancouver, the players have definitely responded. He's got a lot of good things working in his favor. So, this is a real good topic locally more so, and I get it. I understand it. But you can probably have the same conversation with a lot of different teams around the National Hockey League. I don't remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember another season, and I've been covering the NHL a long time, where we've had this many coaches on expiring or interim contracts.
Yeah.
I don't. Head coaches, I don't recall that. And as intriguing a story as it is in Vancouver, well, the same thing applies to Jay Woodcroft and what he's done for the Edmonton Oilers. And the same applies to Marty St. Louis and what he's done for the Montreal Canadiens. So, yeah, there's some work that management groups are going to have to do in the offseason. But as I look at those three Canadian cities, it feels like those are three good problems to have, because the coaching that they have in these cities appears to be the exact coach that they need to push everything in progress, development forward.
Yeah, we talked about a few weeks ago, Chicago, Florida, Montreal, Philly, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Anaheim. There are a lot of teams out there who don't have the head coach secured for next year.
Yeah.
We'll move along. Did you want?
You done here? No, we can go along, but I mean, along the same lines. there's, a lot of the names that you've mentioned here are greener horns than Bruce Boudreau, right? He brings the experience to the table. I was just going to ask about the turnover possibility. I mean, there's very little playoff watching happening. I mean, the Canucks are mired in really the most intriguing playoff race that there is in the league. There's not much going on outside of seeding battles in the playoffs. And of course, the Canucks had reduced expectations of this playoff push given where they started the season. The one team battling against expectation is the Vegas Golden Knights right now. The Canucks may have a part to play if they edge out both the Kings and the Knights and run the table here. The Kings could hold on by the tips of their fingers and eliminate the Golden Knights. What happens there if that happens? If the Golden Knights remain on the outside, and right now the odds don't look good for them either, if they remain on the outside, what happens there?
Yeah, the sky is the limit. We know Bill Foley is an owner who has a strong appetite to win, and they all do, but he's relatively new to the level of disappointment, and he's gone through a fair amount of it, including year one, marching to the Stanley Cup final. So everything about the Vegas Golden Knights from that point forward has been built, designed to contend for the Stanley Cup. And so if they miss the playoffs, I think you have to consider just about everything. But consider and expect are two different things. It looks to me when I watch the Vegas Golden Knights, and it's a bit unfair because they're just starting to get healthy. And anybody who's watched of late, you can see Mark Stone doesn't have the same pep in his step. And I would say the same of Max Pacioretty, both guys coming off long-term injuries. So, it's probably unfair analysis to say that collectively they look disjointed, they look disconnected, given everything that they've been through. And then if you've watched Robin Lehner of late, he's not the Robin Lehner of old, to a point where Pete DeBoer, the head coach, came out and recognized after the 3-2 loss to the New Jersey Devils that New Jersey's goaltender was better than Vegas's goaltender. I mean, that's saying a lot when you lose by one goal in a fairly tightly checked game in a 3-2 loss. But there were two goals in that game that didn't look good. So I guess why we're looking at the bigger picture rather than, what would be considered headline grabbing, like the coach getting fired, the manager getting fired, is, what sort of adjustments are they willing to make to that roster? And that's difficult, right? Because there's such a cap-heavy team that if you're looking at goaltending and say, okay, well, we've got to join the group of teams that has to upgrade in goal. How do you do that? How exactly are you doing that? You're going to have to move out pieces. So I think that the roster tinkering or changing, maybe tinkering is not strong enough a word, is probably best case scenario. I think it just all depends on how Bill Foley, as owner of the Vegas Golden Knights, feels when the Vegas Golden Knights fail to qualify for the playoffs.
Amazingly, they have 83 million committed next year on an 82.5 cap with only Riley Smith and Matthias Janmark coming off the books as UFAs. Boy, it is a capologist nightmare. They're going to earn their money, whoever the Vegas capologist is there. What's going on with Evander Kane in New York in his hearing with the head office?
Well, a lot of heavy lifting, evidently, right? I mean, we know that Evander Kane took the 2-day personal leave from the Edmonton Oilers and then realized why, and that was because there was the grievance hearing conducted in New York between the Players Association and National Hockey League involved, obviously, Evander Kane and the PA trying to recoup some of, if not all of the 20+ million that was terminated as his contract was burned up by the San Jose Sharks. Again, a weird scenario. Normally those hearings, those grievance hearings, they can take a good part of a day. Some of them are less than that. But, in this case, there was a lot to unpack. And they didn't get it done in a day. So they've had to schedule another day to sort through this. So all it means to Evander Kane is if he's entitled to any of that money, he's not getting that money anytime soon, because when the second part 2 of the 2-day hearing is concluded, then how long is it going to take to, figure out, all right, well, what exactly does San Jose owe, if anything? That might take several weeks, if not longer. I feel like all parties want to get something done prior to free agency, because even though it doesn't really matter, it does kind of matter, doesn't it? Maybe Evander Kane, his decision making process is altered a little bit if the San Jose Sharks have to pay him 5, 10, 15, $20 million in guaranteed money, and they shouldn't have been allowed to terminate his contract. Or if he gets $0, well, he's going to have to try and rebuild his financial empire again. And the only way you can do that is through free agency, which is coming. So that would probably be the deadline that I'd be looking at to get some sort of conclusion to all of this.
I know fans don't necessarily, attach much meaning for their own consumption of Hockey Canada product based on the CEO. We know Tom Renney. We've talked a lot with him over the years.
Cranbrooks, Tom Renney, yes, former coach of the Canucks.
Former coach there. So lots of connections here. But again, he's sort of been out of sight, out of mind as the CEO of Hockey Canada. It's not a front-facing position necessarily. It's not a wins and losses position. What's next for him, and should hockey fans care who goes in there next?
Well, I mean, what's next for Tom Renney, I think, is a long and richly earned vacation. And I'm hoping for his sake that vacation turns into a full-time retirement, right? Because he has earned it. He's been around the world of hockey basically his entire adult life. And excuse me, we know how we've all been impacted in our own personal lives with the pandemic. We know how we've been impacted professionally because of the pandemic. Those boys inside the executive offices of Hockey Canada have worked countless hours just trying to figure out the logistics of, well, how can we make this work? And we're not talking just about, the jewels of the crown, like the World Junior Hockey Championship. We're talking about, grassroots hockey and being there for all levels of grassroots hockey, coast to coast in Canada. And Tom Renney, as CEO, is the face of that. Now, not that long ago, they shifted over the president's title to Scott Smith. And that was more because of the business side of things. And Scott Smith was in a position where he could take some of that off of the plate, a lot of it off of the plate of Tom Renney. And Tom Renney could focus more, again, on some of the bigger items that Hockey Canada has had to address. And that's not just competitions. We're talking about diversity. We're talking about inclusion. We're talking about some of the inner workings of Hockey Canada as that pertains internationally and whatnot. These guys have worked tirelessly around the clock. So I got a lot of time for Tom Renney, and Scott Smith will be both the CEO and president of Hockey Canada. So he is the new face when you think of the Hockey Canada logo now, effective July 1st.
And with respect to all you just said, of course, the pandemic making things very, very busy, and with no disrespect to Tom Renney, I almost feel like Bob Nicholson did all the heavy lifting in that role, and it's a little bit more autopilot since. I mean, do you guys remember Hockey Canada used to be a little office on Bureaucrat Row in Ottawa? I mean, Murray Costello running it, and Bob Nicholson said, no, we're taking it to Calgary. We're getting ourselves a home base. It will have a rink attached, Father David Bauer Arena.
But now you can't drop the ball, though. Now you can't drop the ball.
Well, that's it.
Right?
It is pretty much don't screw it up from here type of position. Dregs, thank you for this, my friend. Next week we'll bring, I think, a lot more intrigue, because I think we'll know where the Canucks stand. And, of course, we'll be real interested in where the coach is at with the club and where the club is at with the coach. Thank you for this, sir.
All right, guys. You guys have a great week.